He sat alone in the dugout's corner, rifle across his knees, staring at the others as they pretended to rest. He could feel their eyes on him, even when they turned away. Every creak, every whisper, every cough was Margaret's voice. "Wake up, Henry. Please wake up." He pressed his hands to his ears, rocking, muttering to himself. The mud smelled stronger, sharper, until it became the sting of antiseptic. The flicker of lanterns became electric lights. The groans of the wounded became the hum of machines. And for a moment, just a moment, Henry wasn't in France at all. He was in a white room. A doctor's voice murmured beyond the door. Margaret wept softly at his side. Then the mud crashed back over him. The trench walls closed in. The rats skittered across his boots. And Henry realized he could no longer tell which world was real. Chapter 4: A Knife in the Dark. The trench had turned against him. Henry felt it in the way the men looked at him. They no longer spoke his name, only muttered when he passed. Their eyes lingered too long, dull and glassy, like carrion birds waiting for a body to stop twitching. He kept to himself. Slept in the dugout's farthest corner, if he slept at all. Ate quickly, back to the wall, knife clenched under the table. He trusted none of them now, not Miller, not the pale boy from Kent whose name he couldn't remember, not even the quiet Scot who used to share his rations. They whispered about Davies. They blamed Henry. He had seen their faces when they carried the sergeant's body back, stiff as a plank. The mud had already swallowed his blood, but the look in their eyes stayed sharp. Miller especially. He watched Henry with the patience of a hound, waiting for the order to strike. Henry's hands never left his rifle. That night, he dreamed again. The dream came like fever. He was in the trench, but it was wrong, too clean, walls white instead of mud, the boards gleaming like polished tile. The air smelled not of rot, but of antiseptic. He could hear machines beeping in rhythm, steady, unbroken. Margaret stood in front of him, older again, her face lined with grief. She wore no mud-stained dress this time, but a neat blouse, her hands folded before her. "Henry," she said softly. "You've been asleep so long." He tried to reach for her, but his arms felt bound, weighted down. "I'm awake. I'm here." No, she shook her head. "You're lost. You're still in the mud. They're feeding you lies. You must wake up before you forget me." The beeping quickened. Somewhere behind her, voices murmured, men's voices, calm but stern. "He's unstable. The swelling hasn't gone down. Prepare for the possibility of failure." Henry's chest seized. "Who are they? What are they saying?" Margaret stepped closer, cupping his face in her cool hands. "Wake up, Henry. Wake up now, or you'll die here." Her hands turned to mud, oozing down his skin. The white walls cracked, bursting open to reveal sandbags and shadows. The beeping became the shriek of shells. Margaret's face melted away. Henry jolted awake, gasping, mud clinging to his tongue like blood. When dawn came, Miller cornered him. Henry had gone to fetch water from the cistern, his helmet clutched in his hands, when Miller blocked the narrow trench. "You're dangerous," Miller said flatly. His voice was quiet, but his eyes burned. Henry's grip tightened on the helmet. "I did what I saw. Out there it wasn't Davies. It was something else. You shot our sergeant in the chest." Miller's jaw clenched. "If we don't put you down, you'll get the rest of us killed." Henry's pulse thundered in his ears. "You don't understand. You didn't see them. The dead are walking out there. The wire whispers my name. Margaret calls me." Miller's face twisted in disgust. "You're mad." He reached for his knife. Henry's body moved before his mind. the helmet swung, crashing into Miller's skull with a hollow crack. Miller staggered, cursing. Henry shoved him back into the mud, snatched his rifle, and ran. The trench twisted around him, men shouting, hands grabbing. He slipped past, boots pounding the boards, until he reached the firing step and hauled himself over the parapet. No man's land spread before him, grey and endless, fog clinging like a shroud. The ground squelched beneath his feet, bodies jutting from the mud like stones in a graveyard. Bullets whined. Someone shouted behind him. Henry stumbled forward anyway, into the fog, away from the trench, away from Miller's accusing eyes. He didn't know how long he wandered. The fog thickened, swallowing the world. Shapes loomed and vanished, shattered helmets, broken rifles, bones. Once he thought he saw a horse rear in the distance, but its body was half gone, ribcage yawning like an open gate. He pressed on, stumbling, the mud sucking at his boots. His breath rasped loud in his ears. His chest burned. Then he heard her. Henry. Margaret's voice, clear, just ahead. He pushed forward, heart leaping. The fog parted. She stood there, barefoot, her white dress untouched by mud. She smiled faintly, her curls framing her pale face. Margaret, he breathed. She held out her hand. Come with me. He reached for her, trembling. His fingers brushed hers. And the world snapped. The fog split open, and for an instant Henry was somewhere else entirely. White walls. Bright lights. A mask over his face. A doctor leaning over him, murmuring. Margaret sitting in a chair, her hands clenched in her lap, her eyes red from weeping. His brain's trapped, the doctor said. He's not responding. We may have to let him go. Margaret looked up, straight into Henry's eyes, as if she could see him. No, she said fiercely. He's still in there. I can feel it. Henry, please, wake up. Henry screamed, ripping at the mask. The world shattered again. He was back in the mud, gasping, his hand outstretched to nothing. Margaret was gone. Only the corpses watched him, their mouths slack, their eyes hollow. When they found him, he was crawling. 2 soldiers dragged him back into the trench, cursing, mud thick on their uniforms. Miller wasn't among them, but Henry saw the way they glanced at him like he was already a corpse, just waiting to stop breathing. They threw him into the dugout, where he collapsed against the wall. His lungs heaved. His hands shook. He wanted to tell them what he'd seen, the white walls, the doctors, Margaret pleading, but the words curdled in his throat. Instead he pressed his face into the crook of his arm, tasting mud and blood, and listened as Margaret's voice whispered in his ear. Hold on. Don't let them bury you. The men muttered in the shadows. The lantern flickered. Henry's eyes burned with fever. He wasn't sure which was worse. The trench that wanted him dead, or the other world, just out of reach, where he might already be dying. Chapter 5, The Rot Beneath. They kept Henry under watch. 2 men, rifles always close, their eyes never leaving him. They didn't tie him, though Henry could feel the weight of the rope in the sergeant's empty place, and could see Miller's hard stare every time he shifted in the dugout. The air inside was close, wet with breath and mold. A candle guttered in the corner, smoke curling like black veins across the ceiling. The men whispered to each other in low tones, cutting off when Henry lifted his head. He pressed his palms against his eyes, willing the dark to stay. Because in the dark, Margaret came. She whispered to him, gentle as when she used to wake him for school. She told him he wasn't mad, that none of this was real, that he needed only to wake. Her voice kept him alive. But then he'd open his eyes, and the dugout walls would close in. The whispers would return. And he wasn't sure anymore if the voices belonged to the soldiers or the dead. The fifth night after Davy's death, Henry woke up choking. The air was thick with smoke, acrid and sharp. He gasped, clutching his throat, but the other men slept or pretended to. He staggered up the dugout steps, boots slipping, and burst into the trench. The world had changed. White light glared overhead, searing his eyes. The trench was gone. He stood in a corridor, walls tiled, floor gleaming. Machines beeped steadily. He could smell antiseptic, clean and cruel. Margaret's voice floated from the end of the hall. "Henry!" He stumbled forward, heart hammering. The corridor stretched, endless. Shadows loomed, figures in coats, their faces hidden by masks. They murmured to one another in clipped tones. Cerebral swelling. His heart strong, but the brain too long. He won't come back. Prepare the family. Henry clutched his head. No. I'm here. I'm awake. He ran. The corridor bled into mud beneath his boots. The white tiles cracked into sandbags. The lights dimmed into lantern flames. The beeping turned into shellfire. He collapsed to his knees, gagging on smoke. Rats skittered over his hands, their teeth yellow and sharp. And Margaret whispered again, so close he could feel her breath on his ear. "Don't let them bury you, Henry. Don't let them." In the morning, Miller dragged him up by the collar. "You're a danger," Miller hissed. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face gray with exhaustion. "Last night you screamed like a lunatic. Woke the whole bloody trench. If the Hun had been listening, we'd all be dead." Henry's lips trembled. "I saw them. The doctors. They're keeping me there, trapped. Margaret says I have to wake up." Miller's fist struck his mouth. Pain burst across Henry's jaw, metallic and sharp. He tasted blood. "You're mad," Miller spat. "If Command doesn't shoot you, I will." The other men didn't speak, but their silence was agreement. Henry staggered back, wiping his mouth. He looked at their faces, gaunt, hollow, unblinking. They weren't men anymore. Not really. Their skin was gray. Their eyes were glassy. Their breaths were shallow hisses. Corpses, he thought. They've been dead all along. The trench wasn't filled with soldiers, it was filled with carrion, puppets strung on mud and wire. Henry clutched his rifle tighter. That evening, the patrols reported movement in no man's land. The Germans were testing the wire again, crawling through the craters. Orders came down, stand to. Henry climbed the firing step with the others, his heart hammering. The fog was thick, the wire bristling like black thorns. The smell of rot hung heavy. Shapes moved in the mist. Crawling, stumbling, dragging themselves forward. Henry squinted. His vision wavered, blurred. Some of the shapes wore German helmets. Some had no faces at all. One lifted its head and grinned, teeth jagged and wet. "They're coming," Henry whispered. "The dead are coming." He raised his rifle and fired. The shot cracked the silence. Miller cursed. "Hold your fire, you fool." But Henry saw them, swarms of them, bodies pulling themselves through the mud, arms reaching, mouths gaping. He fired again, each shot punching holes into the fog. The others shouted, grabbing at his rifle, but Henry wrenched free. "Don't you see? They're already dead. They're coming for us." A hand clamped on his shoulder. He spun, thrusting with the bayonet. The steel sank deep. The soldier gasped, eyes wide, blood bubbling from his lips. He crumpled in Henry's grip. Henry stared, horrified. The man's face was slack, pale. He wasn't German. He wasn't a corpse. He was one of theirs. The trench erupted. Miller lunged, knife drawn. Others shouted, some backing away, some rushing forward. Henry ripped his bayonet free, staggering back, his breath ragged. "You don't understand," he cried. "They're not men anymore, they're the dead. They're all dead." The words were drowned by screams. Henry fled into the dugout, the lantern light flickering wildly. His chest heaved, blood streaking his hands. The shadows writhed on the walls, twisting into faces, hollow-eyed, slack-jawed, whispering his name. He pressed his back to the wall, bayonet raised, as the whispers swelled. "Henry! Henry! Wake up!" The lantern guttered. The walls dissolved. For a moment, he was back in the white room again, machines humming, doctors murmuring. Margaret knelt beside him, her hand gripping his. Tears streaked her face. "Please," she begged. "Please, Henry. Wake up. Don't let it take you." He tried to answer, but mud filled his mouth. The white room faded. The trench roared back, wet and stinking. The door banged open. Miller stood there, knife glinting. Henry screamed. Chapter 6, Hunted. Henry ran. The dugout door slammed shut behind him, Miller's shout echoing down the trench. His boots hammered the duckboards, splashing through pools of water, mud sucking at his steps. His breath came ragged, his chest burning. They were after him. He could hear them, shouts, boots thudding, steel scraping. They were hunting him like an animal. He stumbled around a bend, pressing himself against the wall. His pulse thundered. Every shadow writhed. Every dripping sandbag seemed to twitch. They weren't men anymore. He was sure of it. Miller's eyes had been empty, glassy, the stare of a corpse. The others moved stiffly, like puppets yanked on rotten strings. They had died long ago. Only Henry remained. He clenched the rifle tight, his knuckles white. "Henry!" The voice froze him. Margaret stood a few feet away, pale in the lantern light. She wore her Sunday dress, but mud splashed up her bare legs. Her eyes were wide, pleading. "You have to stop running," she whispered. "They'll kill you if you don't wake up." He shook his head violently. "I can't, if I stop. They'll gut me. They're already dead, Margaret, can't you see?" She stepped closer, hand outstretched. Her fingers were warm when they touched his face, warm, alive. He almost believed it. But then the trench roared with shouting. Boots pounded closer. Margaret's face flickered like a candle flame, wavering. Her eyes hollowed, her skin sagged, her mouth gaped. She dissolved into smoke. Henry's scream tore the air as Miller rounded the corner. The knife flashed. Henry threw himself sideways, the blade tearing through his tunic. He swung the rifle butt, cracking against Miller's shoulder. The man grunted, staggering, but came on again, teeth bared. Henry lunged. The bayonet tore across Miller's cheek. Blood sprayed, black in the dim light. Miller roared, knife slashing. They grappled, slipping in the mud, steel flashing, breath hot. Henry felt the blade skim his ribs. His own bayonet punched into Miller's side, slid deep. Miller gasped, his mouth filling with red. He crumpled against Henry, heavy and limp. Henry shoved him away, chest heaving. Miller lay still, eyes wide, blood pooling beneath him. The shouting behind grew louder. The others were coming. Henry staggered back, staring at his hands, slick with blood, shaking. "I didn't want to," he muttered. "I didn't want to, Margaret." But Margaret wasn't there. Only the trench, closing in, the dead marching nearer. He fled again. The trench twisted endlessly, walls sagging, water rising. The deeper he ran, the stranger it became. Sandbags turned to white tiles. Lanterns flickered into electric lamps. The mud stank of antiseptic. He stumbled into a wide chamber. At first he thought it was a dugout, but no, this was different. The walls gleamed. The floor shone. Machines beeped steadily, wires snaking into shadows. And there he was. Henry froze, breath caught in his throat. On a bed in the center of the room lay himself. Pale, thin, motionless. Tubes threaded into his arms. A mask covered his mouth. His chest rose and fell slowly, weakly. Margaret sat beside the bed, clutching the hand of the man that was him. Her eyes were raw from crying. Henry staggered forward. "Margaret!" Her head jerked up. For an instant, her gaze met his, sharp, direct, as though she could see him. "Henry," she whispered. "Come back to me." He reached for her. But the machines wailed, the lights flickered, the walls cracked. Mud seeped through the tiles. The bed sank into the earth. Margaret's face dissolved. The hospital vanished. He was alone in the trench, screaming into the void. By morning, he had vanished from the company. The men whispered about him, some said he had gone over the top, wandering no man's land until the Germans cut him down. Others claimed the trench had swallowed him, mud closing over his head. But Henry wasn't dead. Not yet. He crawled through a collapsed sap trench, alone, muttering to himself, bayonet clenched. His body ached. His head burned. His ears rang with Margaret's voice, repeating, pleading, begging him to wake. He found himself in a ruined dugout, half-collapsed, timber beams jutting like broken bones. He slumped in the corner, shaking, and pressed the blade against his own palm until blood welled. "I'm still here," he whispered. "Still alive. You can't bury me. You can't." Rats scurried over his boots. Water dripped steady as a clock. And from the walls, from the wire, from the corpses above, came the whisper of Margaret's voice. "Wake up, Henry. Wake up." He pressed the bayonet to his throat. But his hand shook too violently to push. That night, he dreamed again. He lay in the bed, tubes in his arms, machines screaming. Doctors shouted over him. Margaret clung to his hand, sobbing. "He's slipping," one doctor cried. "His heart's failing. Hold him, hold him." Henry thrashed. He couldn't breathe. His chest burned. Mud filled his lungs. Margaret leaned close, her voice a desperate whisper. "Fight it, Henry. Please. Come back to me." Her face blurred, splitting into two, the Margaret of the garden, young and smiling, and the Margaret of the hospital, older, grieving. Both called his name. "Wake up!" Henry's scream tore the dream apart. When he opened his eyes, he was still in the trench. The hospital was gone. And he wasn't sure he could ever find it again. Chapter 7: No Man's Land. Henry woke with the taste of earth in his mouth. His face was pressed into mud, cold and bitter, and when he lifted his head it pulled away in thick strands. His chest heaved, lungs raw from smoke and damp. For a moment, he didn't know where he was. The trench was gone. Timber walls, duckboards, comrades, all gone. Around him stretched a wasteland. Shell craters gaped like open wounds, water shining black in their depths. Shattered trees clawed at the grey sky. The ground was carpeted with the dead, limbs tangled, uniforms stiff with rot, helmets cracked open like eggshells. Henry staggered to his feet, swaying. His rifle was gone. Only the bayonet remained, clutched in his slick hand. The silence was crushing. No gunfire, no whistles, no shouted orders. only the wind whispering across the wire. And beneath that, faint, almost too faint to hear. Beep. 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 His heart lurched. He turned, eyes scanning. There, beyond a collapsed crater, a light flickered. Not fire, not lantern. Something cold, white, steady. Henry stumbled toward it, boots dragging. Each step sank deep, mud clutching at him, hands of the dead pulling at his legs. He wrenched free, gasping. Faces turned up from the muck, glass eyes, slack mouths, teeth grinning. Henry, they whispered. He pressed his palms to his ears. No, no, no. But the voices came from inside, burrowing, gnawing. Wake up. The light grew stronger. He crested the lip of a crater and froze. Inside lay a bed. White sheets, sharp and clean against the muck. Machines stood around it, wires snaking into the dark. On the bed lay himself, pale and still, chest rising faintly. Margaret sat beside the bed, her hand on his. Her hair hung loose, her face drawn tight with fear. Henry, she whispered. Her eyes lifted, finding him. You have to fight. Please. Come back to me. His breath caught. He took a step forward. And